All right, before we start today, I just want to pay honor to Joey Reid. Joey Reid has unfortunately lost her show at MSNBC. She was canceled, and I'm just going to say that I started this show too late, and I missed out on a major opportunity to use her as the cartoonish caricature of all that is ridiculous about the left. And now that you're gone, Joy, we're going to have to work harder. Now, if you're wondering why Joey Reid got fired, and you're thinking, well, maybe it's because of her poor ratings among the demographic, only 60,000. That's certainly better than this show, but, not great. Her analysis is extremely poor. She gets it wrong about everything. But let's just hear why Rachel Maddow thinks she got canceled.
I will tell you, it is also unnerving to see that on a network where we've got two non-white hosts in primetime, both of our non-white hosts in primetime are losing their shows, as is Katie Fang on the weekend. And that feels worse than bad, no matter who replaces them. That feels indefensible, and I do not defend it.
You heard it from Rachel Maddow herself. It is indefensible. That's right. MSNBC is racist. Let's get into the show. All right, so this episode is titled "The Time I Lost an Argument." Seems like a funny way to promote the ideas of liberty to explain when I lost an argument. But, we're going to be intellectually honest. And also, I think I've an answer to the question. So when something like this. So in a job that I worked at a few years ago, I used to discuss politics with a coworker of mine. His name was Ben Bartlett, a very talented designer. And we used to banter a lot about, different political topics. And so the question, it came up like this. I was making the argument that welfare is immoral from the perspective of the fact that the state is basically stealing money to give it to other people, and I don't think that can be justified. So he said to me like this. He said to me, Walter, my father does a lot of work with the Orthodox community in Canada, and he noticed that there's a lot of internal welfare programs in the Orthodox community. So maybe the reason why you have such a strong position on welfare and government entitlement is because you know that if God forbid you fell in hard times, your community would take care of you. And I must tell you, at the time, I was completely stumped. It was a very strong question on what I believe from a few perspectives. Firstly, it's really wrong to argue a position, a policy that you'll never be affected by. We see this by the celebrities always saying we should have open immigration. No one's illegal, but they live in gated communities with armed security. And so what they're saying is other people should have to live like that. Remember when all those illegal immigrants are dropped off in Martha's Vineyard? There's not one of them remaining, right? Same for the ones that dropped off outside the vice president's residence. If you can argue a policy that you would live by, it's probably that your philosophy is flawed and doesn't apply to everyone. But also, it's really hard for people to completely separate out their intellectual and emotional views. And so it would be very hard for me to make the case that I'm just purely intellectual libertarian if I don't have a good answer to this question. Anyway, I was honored that this was the question that I lost at, because I really felt a deep sense at the time of appreciation to be in the Orthodox Jewish community, to feel like, yes, it's true. I take care of my neighbors, and I expect that they would do the same for me. And it's a real blessing. And as I was thinking about that, I realized that that's really the answer to the question. You see, a community like mine will provide for me, but it is certainly not without strings attached. They expect me to live in a certain way. And if I want to be part of that community, and if I want to benefit from being as part of the community, there's moral expectations of me. There's an expectation of me that I should be married, have a family, raise children, educate them a certain way. Now, I'm not telling you that's for everyone. I'm a libertarian, far from it. I'm just telling you that when there's a community, resources get allocated to people in need. They get allocated with expectations, as opposed to the government. You see, nothing is really free, right? You're not really getting any money. You're not getting any money for free. So what is the entitlement programs? What are they buying? What they're doing is they're buying votes and they're buying dependency. So now the state is incentivized to keep these programs going. It's not incentivized to improve the life of the people. It's incentivized to keep them subsisting on welfare. Whereas if you have a local charity, if you have a local organization, you don't want to perpetually giving money to somebody, because those funds are limited, and you're answerable to the people that donate. So you're going to try get people off welfare. You're not going to try to perpetuate the problem. So the incentives are completely inverted. The Great Society, which caused a lot of these programs, it certainly eliminated a lot of homelessness and hunger. But what were the ill effects? I think when you look at some of those, I think you'll see a huge increase of fatherlessness in homes since the government has been involved in welfare. I don't think that is a coincidence. I think when you incentivize, when you give people money to have babies out of wedlock, and when you give single mothers money, and when you have food stamps and welfare and HUD, what you're essentially removing is the responsibility of men to take care of the repercussions of their actions. You're removing responsibility from society. Whereas if this was a community charity, there would be much bigger pressure to say, who's the father? What's going on over here? What kind of life are you living that you just have children out of wedlock? Why do you think the responsibility is on the community? I think that is missing. We often talk about how immoral the giving of entitlements from the state's perspective is so immoral. But we don't talk about the poison it is to the recipient. Because when you're to receive without expectations, to receive without obligations is extremely harmful. It creates the worst type of incentives. And I think community also provides meaning. And I think what you're seeing in a lot of American cities today is a lack of meaning. I think, Trump is pushing now for new war on drugs. Basically, we're gonna lock down the borders. The war on drugs has never worked. Never worked. We spent billions in fighting drugs. It's never helped. Why? Because the problem of addiction is not a problem of supply and demand. It is not, and if it was, we're never going to stop the supply of drugs coming into the country, because we're not going to prosecute users. So we're only going to prosecute dealers. And if we only prosecute dealers, then every time we remove one, we increase the incentive to sell it because you're upping the price. So it's impossible. How do we combat the crisis of addiction in this country? We need people to have meaning. You see these homelessness people in San Francisco, someone just going to the bathroom, taking a dump in the middle of the street. Do you think it is because he's unhoused? It is because he can't afford housing in California? No, he's given up on his humanity. He's given up on living. And I think what if people have found themselves outside the community, outside peer pressure of that. And I'm sure there's a lot of negatives to go with there are a lot of negative communities. I'm not saying that every community is equal. Certainly not saying that. But what I am saying is that without the state having taken over welfare, it would be distributed among local people who know what to do. Instead of the government taking so much money, the biggest spending is entitlements. Instead of the government taking that, I think Americans are the most charitable people in the world. People often say libertarians are heartless. It's not true. I certainly believe as a libertarian that if you have a country where people going bankrupt because they can't afford medical care is a problem. I think a country that has homelessness is a problem. It's certainly a terrible reflection on the country. The same goes for hunger. But I think also if you have a country that is supporting people that are doing drugs in these harm reduction programs, which is basically just be a drug addict on the dime of the taxpayer, I think that is both harmful to the taxpayer, and I certainly think these are community responsibilities. I just think that the state has no right to seize, and when the state does seize, it makes things worse. It was a really sad week this week for the Jewish people. We had the funeral of the two Bibas children and their mother, Shira, who was murdered in captivity. All of us saw them being kidnapped alive along with their father. Although we suspected that they had died, their bodies were returned to Israel in the monstrous spectacle we've ever seen. Just an orgy of death, the most awful graphics with their coffins on the stage. Then it turned out it wasn't Shira, and the coffins were locked. Just this awful display. They were playing music and dancing. Once they examined the bodies, they concluded that they were strangled to death. Now, I don't know if you saw the videos, but the Bibas were not captured by Hamas. They were captured by Palestinian civilians. And so it's important to reflect on to the culture. We hear a lot about the plight of Palestinian civilians, but I don't know who these Palestinian civilians are. And I do know that there are a lot of children in Gaza. I do feel for them. But is it the responsibility of Israel to care more about the safety of children from Gaza than the people of Gaza do? Because a society that has a parade and sings and dances about the cold-blooded murder of children, that they captured them alive. They were alive when they were taken to Gaza by Palestinian civilians, and they were murdered with bare hands, little boys. If they're a society that can glorify that, we as humanity have the right to demand change from these people. It is unacceptable for us to tolerate a glorification of death. If there was a culture of cannibals in today's day and age, we would not tolerate that. We would not say all cultures are equal. We do not say that countries that execute people for whatever sin, for whatever ridiculous crime that they committed is okay. And so societies that murder babies have to change. Jake Tapper announced that he's releasing a book called Original Sin on the cover-up of Joe Biden's mental incapacity. So I don't know if you know about this, but there was a cover-up, and Jake Tapper was not in on it. No. Jake Tapper, who has been in the legacy media for years, he didn't know about it until this debate. Even though we all knew about it, even though everybody in the country knew about it, even was blatantly obvious, he apparently didn't know about it. And when he discovered about it, he got down to write a book on this terrible cover-up. Let's watch what the legacy media was saying about Joe Biden right before that debate performance. All right, I think you get the gist of that. They were all liars, all of them, and they all knew about it. There is no way General Milley didn't know that Joe Biden was mentally incapacitated. There is no way that they didn't know he had dementia. Joe Biden is the only person we've ever seen fall up. And I'm not trying to make fun of old people, but people that fall going upstairs often have dementia, and they should not be the president of the United States. And the fact that they covered up was dangerous. And now the legacy media is like, well, why is everyone turning to podcasts? Why does nobody listen to us anymore? Why does nobody trust the media? And they were saying, oh, it must be misinformation and disinformation and all this nonsense. No, the reason why they don't trust you is because you're liars. You lied about Russiagate. You lied about Ukraine. You lied about the war in Iraq. You lied about everything. So now they found a way to get somebody who they don't think are liars. And Joe Rogan may be a comedian, but he's not a liar. And if you want to get your credibility back, own up, retract the stories that you got wrong, and stop lying. And on the point of Joe Biden, this is something, and I'd really like to hear comments from the viewers. Something I don't understand is, what were the Democrats thinking putting Biden up? Like, why'd they run him the first time? Do they have such a weak bench that the Democrats could only find the 76-year-old man who was on the way to dementia, Obama's vice president, who was known to be a goofball, even when he was not senile? Is the only reason they decided to run him for the second time was because Kamala was just so toxic? So then why did they have her be his vice president? For the party that clearly rigs their system, I do not understand how they ended up with such a weak candidate. It's very, very strange to me. Unless being able to control a president was so compelling to the Democrat Party, I don't know. If you can come up with anything better, let me know. All right, that will do it for today, guys. Please leave us a review. It really helps gain viewership. See you next week.